Hello, everyone. This is Tiffany coming through right here live in effect on this beautiful day. Today is Monday. No, excuse me. Today is Tuesday, May the 18th. Yes, it's Tuesday, May the 18th of 2021. Today's topic is going to deal with the Melungeon people and the Freedmen and also the Freedmen Bureau. So today I wanted to address, especially with the Melungeon people, because there has been some misunderstanding, misconception, and I'm going to look at those misconceptions, right? I don't know what kind of information that people have been taught, but whatever they've been told, they have been told some lies. So the first thing I'm going to read, someone put on here on my Facebook page that the Phoenicians did come to North America. White settlers even mistake them for Negroes. Look up the lost trial of the Abolish Melungeons. So that right there, that information is not true. The Phoenician was a whole different set of group. Okay, they was a whole different set of group. They were not Melungeon people. So to disambiguate and to clear up the misconception about the Melungeon people, I want to go to the source, and that's what I'm going to do. Let me see what my brother put on here. Brother Geechee put Melungeon also have a connect with the Atlantic Creoles as well. Well, see, I didn't know that. That's interesting. See, Brother Geechee said that they have a connect with Atlantic Creoles. And you know, I could believe that. I could believe that because, like, if you look at the people in Louisiana, for example, like the Creole people out there, yeah, they have a higher mixture of European, African, and Native mix. So it's a strong possibility and chance that, you know, they are connected with the Melungeon people. And also, if you look at the Appalachia is located from the southern part of New York all the way on down to the northern part of Alabama. So and parts of Georgia too. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's the Melungeon peoples out here in Georgia as well, or some of us got Melungeon mixed in our blood. I wouldn't be surprised. But, you know, thank you, Gishi, for sending that information to me. Thank you. Something to keep in mind. But yeah, let's go ahead and clear this up, because I don't know where people getting this whole thing about the Phoenician people coming to America and Egypt being in America and all that. I mean, I don't know how silly it can get. And I'm glad I do these kind of videos, because that helps to disambiguate and to clear up the misconception and the misnomers that's being put out there, that's being taught. So let's go ahead and start looking at what the Melungeon people are. Since everybody like Wikipedia, for the life of me, I don't understand why people cannot look up proper information on Wikipedia. Right here, this is Wikipedia or Wiki1, same difference. As you can see, who were the Melungeons? It's a term for numerous groups of people of the southern eastern United States. Now, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina are considered as southern eastern part of the United States. All right. And it also says they descend from European, sub-Saharan African settlers. Historically, the Melungeons were associated with settlement in the Cumberland Gap area of Central Appalachia, which includes portion of East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, and Eastern Kentucky. Now, triracial describes, and that's a picture of what the Melungeon will look like. So the triracial describes population who claim to be of mixed European, African, and Native American ancestry. Although there is no consensus of how many such groups exist, estimates range as high as 200. Melungeons are descendants of early Portuguese. Spanish, Jewish, Muslim, Moorish, and Romanian colonists. Okay? Now, what we know so far, what we know so far? So far that it could be a possibility, a chance that yes, they have Native American ancestry, but that's not all they consist of. The Melange people are not just consist of Native American ancestry, not just European, but they also have African ancestry in them. See, that's the information that is left out. So they're considered to be triracial people or people of multiracial ethnic background. Let's say something. Not Louisiana mulatto Creoles, but the Atlantic Creoles on the East Coast. They was descendants of the first Africans that come to the 13 colonies in Virginia. Okay, I got you. Got you. Sorry about the misconception. Okay, I got you. Thanks for clearing that up, Geechee. So yeah, but you're right, yeah, because the Appalachia is located down in the Virginia areas and parts of Alabama and stuff like that. So yeah, they located in the mountain region. So yeah, again, you're right. You're right. So like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if if they are in Georgia, somewhere in the mountains. I wouldn't be surprised because, or what their background is. And I wouldn't be surprised to find out if I had somebody that's Melungeon in my family. I wouldn't be surprised. Right. And Kentucky and Tennessee, absolutely. I was reading a source about that. I was putting up the Wikipedia, Geechee. All right. So let me go ahead and go back to the source. All right, so let's look at the definition. So they say ancestry and identity of the Melanges have been a highly controversial subject. Secondary sources disagree as to their ethnic, linguistic, cultural, and geographic origins and identity. They might articulately be described as a loose collection of families of diverse ethnic origins who migrated to frontier area, settled near each other, and intermarried mostly in Hancock and Hawkins counties in Tennessee, nearby areas of Kentucky, and in Lee County, Virginia. Their ancestors can usually be traced back to colonial Virginia and the Carolinas. They were largely endogamous through the 19th century, marrying primarily within their community until the 1900s. All right, so again, they have been identified as multiracial ancestry. Now let's look at this. It says they did not exhibit characteristics that could be classified as those of a single racial phenotype. Most modern day descendants of Appalachian families traditionally regarded as Melungeon are generally European American in appearance, often, though not always, with dark hair and eyes, a swarthy or olive complexion. Description of Melungeons have varied widely over time. In the 19th and early 20th century, they were sometimes identified as Portuguese, Native American, or light-skinned African Americans. During the 19th century, free people of color sometimes identified as Portuguese or Native American in order to avoid being classified as Black in the segregated slave society. So many of them, get this off of here. Okay, so many of them did identify as Portuguese and some identify as Native American because they did not want to be associated or be identified as Black. And the reason why, because of the racial discrimination towards Black people and how Black people were segregated and were slaves, they had to be careful of being identified or revealing that part of them. So they said, well, okay, either I'll tell them I'm Native American, or I'll tell these folks that I'm Portuguese or European, so that way I won't be classified as such. But then you had those who Melungeon identify as being Black, which that became a problem for them because they had to deal with major consequences of the fact they could not find work, they couldn't go to certain areas, they couldn't live in certain areas, so they were gonna get treated like an African American. You see, and so many of them, so there were those of them that encountered that problems, and then there were those who just didn't want to be associated as such because they didn't want to go through that type of discrimination and missing out on opportunity, not being able to have things for themselves and their family. Hello, brother, how you doing? I'm well. How you doing? All right, so let me go ahead and let's look at some more information. All right. So it says other Melungeon individuals and families are accepted and identified as white, particularly since the mid 20th century. They have tended to marry white since before the 20th century. All right. Now going down to the origins. So according to the principle of partis sequitur ventrem, which Virginia incorporated into law in 1662, children born in the colonies were assigned the social status of their mother, regardless of their father's ethnicity or citizenship. This meant the children of enslaved African or African American women were born into slavery. But it also meant the children of free white or mulatto women, even if their father by enslaved African men were born free. The free descendant of such unions formed the majority of ancestors of the free families of color listed in the 1790 and 1810 U.S. Census. Early colonial Virginia was very much a melting pot of peoples, and before slavery hardened as a racial caste, white and black working class people often lived and worked in close quarters and formed relationships and marriages. Then it says some of these early multiracial families were ancestors of the later Melungeons, yet each family line must be traced separately over the generation. Most individuals of the group called Melungeon were persons of mixed European and African descent, sometimes also with Native American ancestry, whose ancestors been freed in colonial Virginia. So, all right, skipping down. And it says in 2012, the genealogist Roberta Estes and her fellow researcher of the Melange DNA project reported that the Melungeon lines likely originated in the unions of black and white indentured servants living in Virginia in the mid 1600s before slavery became widespread in the United States. They conclude that as a law to prevent the mixing of races were put in place, these family groups intermarry with each other, create an endogamous group. They migrated together, sometimes along with white neighbors from Western Virginia through the Piedmont frontier of North Carolina, before settling primarily in the mountains of East Tennessee. In addition, the Melungeon DNA projects have documented multiracial ancestry, primarily European and African. All right. All right, then. So you get the idea of what the Melungeon people are, I hope. So going down here, assimilation. Aurela Gross has shown by analysis of court cases the shift from perception of an individual as mulatto to white was often dependent upon appearance and especially community perception of a person's activities in life, who one associated with, and whether the person fulfilled the common obligation of a citizen. Census takers were generally people of a community, so they classified racially as they were known by the community. Definition of racial categories were often imprecise and ambiguous, especially for mulatto and free person of color. In the British North American colonies in the United States at the time in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, mulatto could mean a mixture of African and European, African and Native American, European and Native American, or all three, all at the same time. These groups intermarried. So let's go down to modern identity. So as you can see, the modern identity, the term Melange was historically considered an insult, a label applied to Appalachians who were by appearance or reputation of mixed race ancestry. In Southwest Virginia, the term ramp was Similarly applied to people of mixed race, this term has never shed its pejorative character. In December of 1943, Virginia State Register of Vital Statistics, Walter Ashby Pleckler, sent county official a letter warning against colored families trying to pass as white or Indian in violation of the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. He identified specific surnames by county, including Lee, Smith, and Wise, Collin, Gibson, Moore, Goins, Ramsey, DeLeff, Bunch, Freeman, etc. And he directed the offices to reclassify members of certain families as Black, causing the loss for numerous families of documentation and records that showed their continued identification as Native American. Wow, it's deep. So I'm just gonna stop right here. If you guys want to look more, you guys can go on Wikipedia and find out more information. Okay, so right under here it says similar groups. The following are multiracial groups at one time were classified as triracial isolation. Some identified Native American and have received state recognition, as have 6 tribes in Virginia. So in Delaware, you got the Natakico Moors, okay, Natakico groups in Delaware and New Jersey, all right, where they intermarried. The Dominicans of Home County in Florida Panhandle. In Indiana, you got Ben Ishmael tribe, pejoratively called grasshopper gypsies. Of course, in Louisiana, you got the Red Bones, and in Texas, Maryland, you got the Piscataway Indian Nation, formerly also known as Wesorts, one of the Piscataway related groups recognized as Native American tribes by the state. Then you got the New Jersey and New York Ramapo Mountain Indians, aka Jackson Whites, the Ramapo Mountains, recognized by both New Jersey and New York as Native Americans. Of course, North Carolina, Corray, Lumbee, Person Counties Indians, aka Cubans and Portuguese. And then in Ohio, you got Caramel Indians of Highland County. South Carolina, you got the Red Bones, Turks, and Brass Ankles. Virginia, Monacan Indians. West Virginia, Chestnut Ridge people of Barber County, also known as Malays or pejoratively Guineas. All right, so these are the groups of people that are considered multiracial, but they identify as Native Americans, and they have such Native American tribes. All right, but they are of multiracial background. Okay. You talking about them in origin. Let me go back to what you taught my brother Geechee. Let me go back. Okay, I see what you're saying right here in this paragraph. I see what you're talking about, Geechee. All right, then. Thank you for pointing that out to me. I see exactly what you're talking about now. It says, I'm looking into my grandfather from, somebody put, I'm looking into my grandfather from Kentucky, and ancestry has me down as Virginia African Americans. Yeah, so like I said, Jose, it is a strong possibility that you might belong to the Melungeon people. It's a strong possibility. And it's a strong possibility that I might have some Melungeon in my family, because my ancestry said the similar things that yours said too about the Virginia African Americans and those in parts of Carolinas and stuff like that. And I also have ancestry from Florida. My great grandmother, she was from Jacksonville, Florida. So it's a strong possibility. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to put up another source. Well, I got multiple sources that help support this information, and I would like to play a video for you guys as well. So I'm going to show you guys a source called Inventing the Melungeon. You see that? So let me go ahead and zoom it up for y'all. So the chapter titled Inventing the Melungeon, the title of the book coming from Becoming Melungeon, the subtitle Making an Ethnic Identity in the Appalachian South, Arthur Melissa Sharif at the University of Nebraska Press. All right, so these are scholarly sources. Now, right here is chapter 1. And it says right here in chapter 1, as many mixed race individuals struggle to pass and disappear into white society, their mythical shadows surface in popular writing. The mythical Melange, or the image that emerged from the media, materialized in a time period that involved a trio of historical forces. These included a national literary phrase of local color writing, the pursuit of missionary agendas in the Appalachia region, and the industrialization of Appalachia. Appalachia as a distant region became prominent in the national imagination primarily through local color writers who returned from brief visit to the region with lively depiction of a strange land and peculiar people. The local color school was a national post-Civil War phenomenon that aimed to illustrate the heterogeneity of the nation's minority pockets. Local color writing served to accentuate without threatening the national rhetoric of a unified nation. Aimed primarily towards middle-class, urban, literate Northerners, local color writing accessorized the national theme of homogeneity with quaint and lively footnote. The local color school was not specific to the Appalachian region. However, Appalachia proved fertile ground for the colorful narratives of the era. The effect of local color writing in Appalachia and elsewhere was to create images of an exotic otherness in Appalachia. This image evolved into what Anthony Harkins terms the dualistic icon of the hillbilly mountaineer. According to Harkins, the early hillbilly characterization introduced a quirky and carefree simpleton living in poverty without knowledge of or interested in modernity. So I'm just going to stop right there. So what this article is really talking about, it's talking about the Melungeon people, but in a more stereotypical way, not as who they really are, but more stereotypically. So, for example, when people visit the areas where the Melanges live, those individuals was classifying them as hillbillies and impoverished because they didn't understand them. They didn't understand their lifestyle, their culture. So they called them hillbillies. So what that article is presenting is the stereotypical concept of how the Melungeon people were. But that's not actually what they are. You know what I'm saying? They weren't hillbillies. They were just people that lived in the mountain regions. But yeah, if you guys want to look up more information about that, you can. As you can see, that's the title there. All right, so let's go on to the next source. Let's see what you guys talking about in the comment section. Hold on, let me. Okay, let's see something. All right, a lot of Melanges intermixed with more European over the years. A lot of them pass as white today, right? No matter their background, like Abraham Lincoln, for example. You know what? That's funny because that's been talked about Abraham Lincoln being of African descent. There was talk about that for a long time. People always brought up that he had some African ancestry in him. And it's funny that you brought that up, Geechee, as far as Abraham Lincoln is concerned. Because it's been a lot of speculation as far as did he have African ancestry? Was he of a black background what part of his family had that ancestry, etc. So, but nobody could actually prove that he was African descent or had some African in him because he was predominantly European. But it was said to be, I mean, he passed up as a European, of course, I mean, because that's, you know, he has a strong European genetic, but it was always a talk about it as far as did somebody in his family, in his bloodline, was of African descent or if they were slaves or something. So it's just very interesting you brought that point up. That's interesting. Yeah, I would have to look in more. I have to look in more into Abraham Lincoln and his background as far as the Melungeon is concerned. Because again, that's not the first time I heard that. All right, I have another information I want to present to you all. So right here, here's another source if you guys want to check it out. The Melungeon, a mixed blood strain of the Southern Appalachians. Edward T. Price, and this was written in 1951. 1951. Let's see what they were talking about in that time period. So right here in this paragraph, because I'm not going to go any further, it says, in the native vocabulary of East Tennessee and adjacent parts of neighboring states, the word Melungeon is widely used. To some people, it is only a general derogatory term to be bestowed on anyone who monetarily or momentarily arouses their antagonism. Middle Tennesseans are said to have applied it to their former East Tennessee enemies in the bitter period after the Civil War. And at times, the Melungeons have had to fill the place of the boogeyman in holding children in the straight and narrow path. The Melungeons will get you. Wow, that's very offensive. But anyway, it says the persistent folktale, however, insists that the Melungeon are unusual racially. It identifies them as a dark-skinned mixed blood group of uncertain origin centered on Newman Ridge in Hancock County. An Oriental appearance is occasionally attributed to them, but they are most commonly thought to be at least partly of Portuguese descent. The popularity of the mixture, however, is its supposed inability to blend color in crosses with whites. The Melungeon appearance may be lost for a generation or two, only to show up again in full strength. Relatively few people know the Melungeons as a group. More have seen individuals, but the elements of the legend are widely known, even to those who may not seriously entertain the possibility of its reality. Newman's Ridge and the adjacent Blackwater Valley are said to have been settled by the Melungeons before the wave of white settlers from the eastern states reached the area. It is suggested that they stemmed from settlers shipwrecked on the Carolina coast. The Melanges are said to have been disfranchised by the restriction placed on free persons of color in the Tennessee Constitution of 1834. Now, this article was written in 1951. Okay, that was 60 some odd years ago by Edward T. Price. So, you know, information have updated and has changed, of course, and we discovered that there is more to the Melungeon people, but this is pretty much his account, and this is the information about the Melungeons in the Southern Appalachians. So there's something that you guys can look into. You can go on Taylor and Francis, which is the title of the source. And again, you can go on their website, which is tnfonline.com, or you can go on Jasper, Let me highlight this for you guys. You can go on jaster.org. That's the source that you can use. These are peer-reviewed sources, scholarly sources. So you guys can look this up for yourselves if you're interested in reading more about it. Okay. Okay, let me see what else he said. A lot of Melungeon groups claim full native or white for benefits and escape the struggle of being classified as black or to escape the one drop rule. Yes, that's why I mentioned earlier. They did, because if they was to identify as being black, they will miss out on a lot of opportunity of gaining benefits and being able to earn some type of resource. So, of course, many of them did identify as either Native American or Caucasian. They did that because they wanted to be able to have opportunity. So they had to figure out, well, this is the game that we got to play, because we playing the Europeans game. We playing the white folks game. So either we going to identify as being European or Native American, because we can't use black, because we already know what they're going to do till we say black. I mean, we know that we got some black in us, but we ain't finna identify with that. We gonna have to just identify with European, because we look lighter enough to become European. We look lighter enough to become Native American. So yeah, so me and them could be able to pass up to be Native American or to be European. You know? And if you guys know about the brown paper bag test, real quick, the brown paper bag test was like, if you're my complexion or lighter, then you can pass up. But if you was darker than this color or darker than my wooden chair right here that I'm sitting on, then you will not be able to earn any opportunity. So that's the concept they use the brown paper bag to see if you can pass up. If you was light enough to go to certain places, work certain jobs, live in certain areas, etc. So yeah, that's another thing that these Europeans did at the time period. But a lot of people don't talk about the brown paper bag test. Okay, you know what? Let me look into the Atlantic Creole people real fast before I get to my other sources. Let me look into the Atlantic Creole people. All right, so I'm gonna look into the Atlantic Creole, and we going to like get into a little bit of discussion about them real quick. All right, so Atlantic Creole is a term used in North America to describe a mixed race ethnic group of Americans who have ancestral roots in Africa, Europe, and sometimes the Caribbean. These people are culturally American and are the descendant of a chartered generation of slaves and indentured workers during the European colonization of Americas before 1660. Some had lived and worked in Europe or the Caribbean before coming or being transported to North America. Examples of such men included John Punch and Emmanuel Rodriguez. His surname was possibly derived from Rodriguez. All right, then going into a little bit about the history. The historian Ira Berlin identified the arrival of the Atlantic Creoles in the Chesapeake Bay region in the 17th century. Berlin writes that Atlantic Creoles were among what he called the charter generation of slaves in the Chesapeake colonies up until the end of the 17th century. Through the first 50 years of settlement, lines were fluid between black and white workers. Often both worked off passage as indentured servants, and any slaves were less set apart than they were later, the working class lived together, and many white women and black men developed relationships. Many of the new generation of Creoles born in the colonies were the children of European indentured servants and bonded or enslaved workers of primarily West African ancestry. Sometimes Native Americans were also enslaved, and some Indian slaves were brought to North America from the Caribbean, Central, and South America. All right. So that's the information. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it does, because these people are very closely related to the Melungeon people. So as I read the article, the source about the Melungeon people, you can also see that there's a similar concept with the Atlantic Creoles people as well, right? Especially down here, where I got it highlighted in this paragraph. See the parts in Quinterventral. So as you can see, there's a lot of similarity here in this article, as well as the previous article about the Melungeon. So you can see that there is the relationship between the Atlantic Creoles and the Melungeon people as far as their background. Now, the only difference is with the Atlantic Creole, they have Caribbean. So with the Caribbeans, yes, you had Native Americans or Indian people that was in the Caribbeans before the invasion took over, or the colonization had took place. Yeah, you had Native Americans or Indian people like the Taino people. The Taino people are Indian people that were in these islands way before the Africans arrived and way before the Europeans came around. So I just want to point that out. So shout out to Geechee for that. Thank you for showing me that source. All right. All right, that's where the Portuguese came from. The ancestors. The Caribbean's missus was in the beginning. That's a lot of great information there. See, Geechee done put me on a lot of things that I did not know. So you never know. See, what I'm saying is, here's the thing. You never know what's in your genetics, in your DNA. Okay, you never know. So the concept of race as we know it is a social construct. And the reason why it's a social construct, because you have one group of people that want to classify themselves as being the majority and being superior over other groups and having more leverage and power, which we know as the Europeans. So they created this concept of race as we know today to bring about the power, bring about the dominant group. So they consider themselves to be more dominant and the majority, while the rest of us consider as minorities. And so you start to become a little confused and you start to wonder, well, where all this coming from? What we didn't know nothing about these people. Of course, you're not gonna know anything about them because they never gonna teach you that in school. They're gonna teach you from their narrative and their point of view. You're not gonna ever know about this. Of course, you never knew who the Melungeons and the Freedmen and the Creole people were because they never talk about them in school. All they talk about is the Europeans' history when it comes to U.S. history. All right, so also let me show you guys something else. There's a book that you guys can check out that's in relation to the topic right here. This book is called Kinfolks Falling Off the Family Tree: The Search for My Melungeon Ancestors. Lisa Alter. So let's see, when this book was written in 2007 and it was reprinted again in 2011. So if you guys want to check it out, you can go to your library and see if they have this book. If not, you can go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes and Nobles, and you can also get the ebook. All right. So let's go to let's go to this source right here. All right, Melanges, a multi-ethnic population, written by Roberta J. Astis, Jack A. Goins, Penny Ferguson, Janet Lewis Crane. Of course, that's the abstract. Yada, yada, yada. All right, so the abstract said Melange is a term applied historically to a group of persons, probably multi-ethnic, found primarily in Hawkins and Hancock counties, Tennessee. In this article, we defined the Melungeon population study group, then reviewed the evidence from historical sources and DNA testing Y chromosome, mitochondrial DNA, and autosomal DNA to gain insights into the origin of this mysterious group. All right, so that's the introduction. And let's see. So it says the core Melungeon DNA project was formed at Family Tree DNA in July of 2005. With the goal of testing the Y line in the mitochondrial DNA of families identified as Melungeon. The first step was to define which families were Melungeon and were eligible to be included. So it says the popular press has extended the definition of Melungeon drastically. The project administrators researched the various records to determine where the label of Melungeon was actually applied and to whom. They found the word first recorded in 1810 and used for the next 100 years or so, primarily in Hawkins and Hancock counties in Tennessee and slightly into neighboring counties where the Melungeon family community reached over county and state boundary into Calaborn County, Tennessee, and Lee, Scott, and Russell counties in Virginia. The project was subsequently broken into Y line and mitochondrial DNA projects, and in 2010, a Melungeon family project was added with the advance of the Family Finder product. All right, so as you can see, here's the table. So right here, it says Little's living age, 1848, Society of Portuguese Inventors who came from the longshore parts of Virginia intermixed with the Indians, subsequently their descendant with the Negroes and white. Goodspeed's History of Tennessee says Newman's Ridge has since been occupied mainly by a people presenting a peculiar admixture of white and Indian blood. All right, and then also going further down, 1890 and 1891, articles by Will Dormagool, Nashville Reporter, claim to be Cherokee and Portuguese. Some claim a drop of African blood. Collins and Gibson claim Cherokee ancestors stole names of Collins and Gibson. All right. So just leave it off here. This gets into the multiracial ethnic background population and talks about the DNA testing and of those who have Melungeon or of the Melungeon background, etc. So you guys can check this out for yourself if you want to. All right, so here's the title and here's the name. These are the authors here or the researchers. All right. All right, so let me play a video clip real fast, and then I'm going to go on to my next topic. So this video clip is a panel discussion regarding to the history of the Melungeons, and there's people on the panel who have Melungeons in their family, and they're telling their story. So I'm only going to probably play about 10 minutes of the video. It's not going to be very long, so about 10 minutes would be cool. Or if not, maybe about 10, 15 minutes. The title of this video is called Melungeon Criminalization of Race. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play the video.
The complexities of Appalachian histories, and the role the region has played in U.S. history, all of which has been subject to misunderstanding and misinterpretation. The International Storytelling Center is fortunate to be able to provide these important discussions through the generous support of the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is the major funder of the Freedom Stories Project. Today's discussion is recorded, and along with all Freedom Story discussions, will be made available to the public on YouTube, the International Storytelling Center webpage, and Facebook page. I would encourage our viewing audience, if you have questions or comments for me or for the panelists, to text them to our Facebook page, and we will try our best to get to as many as time permits. Today marks the last public discussion we will host this year. Currently, we plan to begin our 2021 discussions Saturday, January 9th, 2021. Please check the International Storytelling Center webpage for the most up-to-date program details regarding our 2021 stories. We are pleased to begin today's discussion, as we always do, with the benefit of a storyteller. And today, we are fortunate to be joined by a nationally recognized author and storyteller, Lynette Ford, who has agreed to share a few of her family stories with us today. Lynn Ford is a fourth-generation storyteller, author, and teaching artist. Her work is rooted in the gifts of her Afro-Latin family heritage of folk tales and personal stories. Lynn put these stories into print in her first two collections under the titles of Afro-Latin Tales and Beyond the Briar Patch, which are both winners of the Anne Izzard Storyteller's Choice Awards. Lynn's work has taken her to schools and conferences, correctional facilities, and women's retreats across the United States and the world, including Australia, Ireland, and by virtue of the Zulaverse, Germany, Singapore, and South Korea. Following Lynn's presentation, I'll rejoin you to introduce our other panel members for today's discussion. But for right now, let's listen to the presentation of stories by our featured storyteller, Lynn Ford.
Thank you. I want to share story in picture a little bit for you first. That's me, that little round-headed child. And I think my head is as big now as it was then. And that's my mama, Jean E. Arkward Cooper Matthews. Now, my mother went to school at Howard University, and the family was thrilled that she went there. And she got a degree in music and came back to her home in the Appalachian region of Western Pennsylvania, Mercer County. And she couldn't get a job, not because she'd done anything wrong, not because her grades were poor, because they were top of the class, but because of who she was. No school would hire her as a music teacher, and there weren't dance studios. She probably would have done better to go to New York City or some other big city, but she wanted to stay where family was, and she wanted to help the folks that were in that valley. When she couldn't get work as a teacher, and she couldn't find much work as a singer with an operatic voice, except solos at church, my mother eventually became a registered nurse and eventually the assistant director of a community for elders. And when she retired from there, that beautiful voice was gone. The music was gone. Her joy was still there, but my mother was not who she might have been just because of what someone else thought she was. This is a picture of her mama, my grandma, Jean. And it turned out Jean was not really her name. She didn't like her name, which was Emma Jean Jessamine Wilson. And so in the family Bible, she just crossed that name out and put Elizabeth Jean. So every firstborn girl in the family had the name Jean. My mother was Jean Elizabeth, is Jean Elizabeth. I'm Lynette Jean. There's an Audrey Jean, a Sandra Jean. That wasn't her name. So we're all named Jean, and that name's just in the Bible and was in her heart, but that wasn't her name. She thought the other name would be an embarrassment. She thought the other name was something folks wouldn't accept because it sounded too country. Now, my grandma could play the piano. She also played saxophone in a jazz band way back when. And that piano she played when the movies had no sound, no music, other than what she made playing on the keys on that piano. But her children could not sit on the first floor where the piano was. They had to sit in the balcony. And if there weren't too many people around who might notice, my mother told me that Grandma would let them sneak down and sit beside the piano, and it was hard to see the movie, but they were on that first floor and close to their mama. Still, she couldn't use her music. She couldn't use her voice, and she died of cancer of the throat without becoming the one she might have been. These are two of my favorites in the family. You see my pop-pops with the dark hair, and my great-pops, his father, my great-grandfather. And I always thought great-pops looked a little bit like Abraham Lincoln with white hair. But they were stonemasons, and they lived in a part of Ohio where they could have worked on the pottery that was being made in the capital, the pottery capital, East Liverpool, Ohio. However, because of who someone decided they weren't permitted to work there. Pop-ups worked in coal mines. He was trained as an engineer, but they wouldn't let him run the train. Eventually, he worked in the steel mill. He still worked on the rails a bit, but not in charge of anything. And great pops could build a wall so fine that it looked like the beginning of a castle. And yet he would never be hired by anyone who would need those skills because he claimed who he was instead of what somebody might think. He had no question about who he was, but that kept him from getting some work. He died of cancer, never being able to run his own business because he didn't have support to start it. And that bit about the pottery, well, there were folks of Italian heritage who couldn't work in the pottery mills either, too close to being Black. And it turned out to be a good thing because the dust in those pottery mills got into the throats and the lungs of the men who worked in them. And they died from diseases and conditions of that dust, while the Black folks and the brown folks thrived. Still, folks held them back from who they could have been. And the last picture, this is a picture of my favorite storyteller, my daddy. Now, he was considered a red bone. Red having to do with the color of his skin as well as the color of his hair, and his eyes were a kind of a hazel color. His mama had the same coloring, and so did my sister. My daddy was a second lieutenant in the Tuskegee Airmen's last graduating classes, and their battle was to integrate the troops. But he had other knowledge besides flying a plane. He could tell you about the weather, and he had certification for that. But when he came back to that valley in Appalachian, Pennsylvania, he couldn't get a job as a weatherman on the radio. Now, who was going to see him on the radio? And he had a smooth radio type voice that would have worked beautifully, kind of somewhere between Barry White and Marvin Gaye. But he couldn't get a job as a weatherman on the radio. And he couldn't get a job flying planes for any airline. And he ended up working in a steel mill and at a gas station to help his mama and to support his family. And he always worked 2 jobs, but he never became what he might have, because it seemed like a crime, like a sin to someone, that he was who he was. And he wasn't ashamed of that, not at all. He was very happy being who he was. He told me, some folks will say who they are, but they really don't know. And some folks know who they are, but they really won't say. I want you to know who you are and be who you are. Well, actually,
all right, so that was the panel discussion. The panel discussion about the Melungeon. As you can see, the lady that's telling her story, her family was of the Melungeon background. So particularly her father's side of the family. So yeah, she was telling her story, giving accounts of that. So yeah, that's the story. As you can see, she mentioned about, I think she's located in Ohio, but where she mentioned that her family was in the Appalachian region in the South, like in Virginia area. So if you guys want to check out the video, you can check it out on YouTube. The title of the video is called Melange, the Criminalization of Race. It's on YouTube. The Melungeon, the Criminalization of Race. All right. So that's enough topic about the Melungeon people. So now I want to get into the topic about the freedmen, because there's another misnomer about the freedmen. So what I've been hearing, that people call themselves the freedmen, right, to get away from being identified with their African ancestry. But believe it or not, the freedmen were of African descent. Okay, they were just emancipated slaves. And whether they were enslaved by the Europeans or whether they were slaves by the Native Americans, they were emancipated and they were free. So they were of African descent. So either way it goes, you can't really get away from that. That's just part of the genetic components. But you know, that's individuals. They try to create their own narratives and try to twist things around to just get away from the identity. So let's look at the Freedmen Bureau. All right, so down here, as you can see, the title say freedman, right? Say freedman or a free woman is formerly enslaved person who has been released from slavery, usually by legal means. Historically, enslaved people were freed by manumission, granted freedom by their captors' owners. Emancipation, granted freedom as part of a larger group, or self-purchase. A fugitive slave is a person who escaped slavery by fleeing. So, of course, it goes into the history about the ancient Rome. And then you got the one about the Arabian and North African slavery. So let's look at the one about the Arabian North African slavery. For centuries, Arab slave traders took and transported an estimate to 10 to 15 million sub-Saharan Africans to slavery in North Africa and the Middle East. They also enslaved Europeans known as Sakaliba from coastal areas and the Balkans. The slaves were predominantly women. Many Arabs took women slaves as concubines in their harems. In the patrilineal Arab society, the mixed-race children of concubines and Arab men were considered free. They were given inheritance rights related to their father's property. No studies have been done of influences of African Arab descendants in the society. That's interesting. So let's look at the United States. So now, who were the freemen of the United States? So in the United States, the term freeman, free woman referred chiefly to former slaves emancipated during and after the American Civil War by the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. Slave free before the war, usually by individual manumissions, often in wills, were generally referred to as free Negroes or free blacks. In addition, there was a population of Black Americans born free. The great majority of families of free people of color recorded in the U.S. Census in the Upper South in the first 2 decades after the Revolutionary War have been found to have descended from the unions between white women and Black men in colonial Virginia. According to the legal principle of partisan quintervention in the slaves colonies. All right, so, and then let's skip on down. In Louisiana and other areas of the former New France, free people of color were classified in French as gens de couleur libres. They were generally born to Black or mixed race mothers and white fathers of ethnic French or other European ancestry. The fathers sometimes freed their children and sexual partners, leading to the growth of the community of Creoles of color or free people of color. The New Orleans had the largest community of free people of color, well established before the U.S. acquired Louisiana. The French and Spanish colonial rulers had given the free people of color more rights than most free Blacks had in the American South. In addition, there were sizable communities of free people of color in French Caribbean colonies such as Saint Dominique, which is now Haiti, and Guadeloupe. Due to violence of the Haitian Revolution, many free people of color were originally part of the revolution, fled to the islands as refugees after being attacked by slave rebels, particularly in the north of the island. Some went first to Cuba, from where they immigrated to New Orleans. Let's read that again. Some went first to Cuba, from where they immigrated to New Orleans in 1808 and 1809 after being expelled when Napoleon invaded Spanish territory in Europe. Many brought slaves with them. Their numbers strengthened the French-speaking community of enslaved Black peoples, as well as the free people of color. Other refugees from Saint Dominique settled in Charleston, Savannah, and New York. Okay. So now let's look under the Emancipation. So the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 declared all slaves in the Confederacy states in rebellion and not under the control of Union to be permanently free. It did not end slavery in the 5 border states that had stayed in the Union. Slavery everywhere was abolished with the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution in December 1865. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 passed over the veto of President Andrew Johnson, gave ex-slaves full citizenship except for voting in the United States. The 14th Amendment was passed to make clear that Congress had the legal authority to do so. The 15th Amendment gave voting rights to all male adults. Only adult males had the franchise among whites. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments are known as the Civil Rights Amendments, the Post-Civil War Amendments, and the Reconstruction Amendments. All right. So what was the 13th Amendment? Right here, as you can see, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude itself as punishment for a crime. And this came in around January 31st of 1865, right? And ratified by the required 27 of the then 36 states on December 6, 1865, proclaimed on December 18th. It was the first of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments adopting the following American Civil War. Okay, so the 13th Amendment was to abolish slavery. Let's see, what was the 14th Amendment? So the 14th Amendment was adopted on July the 9th, 1868 as one of the Reconstruction Amendments, often considered one of the most consequential amendments. It addresses citizenship right and equal protection under the law and proposed in response to issues related to former slaves following the American Civil War, which to me that's very ironic because there still wasn't no protection under law for former slaves. But yeah, but that was the 14th Amendment, citizenship rights and equal protection under law. And then, of course, the 15th Amendment was giving citizen people the right to vote. And at that time, when people earned the right to vote, it was the males, not the females. So it said right to vote based on that citizen race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So that was the 15th Amendment. Okay, and that was under the Reconstruction Amendment. All right, so anyways, it said to help freemen transition from slavery to freedom, including a free labor market, President Abraham Lincoln created the Freedmen's Bureau, which assigned agents throughout the former Confederate states. The Bureau also founded schools to educate freemen, both adults and children, help freemen negotiate labor contracts, and try to memorize violence against freemen. The era of Reconstruction was an attempt to establish new government in the former Confederacy and to bring freemen into society as voting citizens. Northern church bodies, such as the American Missionary Association and the Free Will Baptists, sent teachers to the South to assist in educating freemen and their children, and eventually established several colleges for higher education. U.S. Army occupation soldiers were stationed throughout the South via military district enacted by the Reconstruction Act. They protected freemen in voting polls and public facility from violence and intimidation by white Southerners, which were coming throughout the region. All right, so that's the information about the freemen, okay? It says part of Appalachian Mountains is in Ohio. They go all the way to Canada. All right, so let's look at the Freedmen's Bureau field office record. All right, right here, it says Freedmen's Bureau field office record. Field office record of the Bureau of the Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. The Freedmen's Bureau, 1865 to 1872. Let me zoom that up. Emancipation left freemen, women, and children in desperate need of relief, medicine, housing, family, education, employment, and protection. The Freedmen's Bureau field office records hold stories of their struggle and unprecedented efforts to secure those needs. All right, so the Freedmen's Bureau, it says in the years following the Civil War, the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, the Freedmen Bureau provided assistance to tens of thousands of former slaves and impoverished whites in the southern states and the District of Columbia. The war had liberated nearly 4 million slaves and destroyed the region's cities, towns, and plantation-based economy. It left former slaves and many whites dislocated from their homes, facing starvation and owning only the clothes they wore. The challenge of establishing a new social order founded on freedom and racial equality was enormous. The Bureau was established in the War Department in March of 1865 to undertake the relief effort and the unprecedented social reconstruction that would bring freed people to full citizenship. It issued food and clothing, operated hospitals and temporary camps, helped located family members, promoted education, helped freemen legalize marriage, provide employment, supervise labor contracts, provided legal representation, investigated racial confrontation, settled freemen on abandoned and or confiscated lands, and worked with African American soldiers and sailors and their heirs to secure back pay, bounty payments, and pensions. All right, so here's the headquarters record. Really see it, but it says here the Freemen's Right to Vote, May 1st, 1867. It says measure will be taken as will inform all freemen entitled to be registered of the necessity for and the time and place for of registration and the time of place for voting. And let's see, it says headquarter files document the overall administration and operation of Bureau and its education division and the supervision of state offices. Records including letters, telegrams, and circular letters sent, special orders issued by Commissioner O. Howard, annual records to President, records relating to appointments, and letters received by commissioners. There are summary reports and communication from the State Assistant Commissioner on relief efforts, hospital and vaccination program, labor and land issues, legal issues, field office management, and other activities, as well as school reports, schedules of schools, and rental accounts from state superintendents of education. All right, so as you can see, they got the field office record, which is the second stage of FEMI, start in 2001 with process of the Bureau field office records from 15 southern and border states and the District of Columbia. So right here, you see what says teacher monthly report. So teachers monthly report, Little Rock, Arkansas, March 24, 1865. Number enrolled 65 males, 96 female, 161 total. Number who paid full tuition fees, 17 males, 36 females, 53 total. And it says invaluable records for genealogists. Together, these records present the genealogist and social historian with an unequal wealth of information that extends the reach of Black family studies. Documents such as local census, marriage records, and medical records provided free people's full name and former masters. Federal census through 1860 listed slaves only statistically under the master's household. No name indexes are available at this time, but the document can be rewarded, particularly since they provide full names, residence, and often the names of former masters and plantation. All right, so as you can see, there's more records. So it goes into the whole Freedom Bureau's records as far as the refugees, the freemen, and the abandoned lands, etc. So, and how many people that was enrolled in the school programs. And here's the marriage records, the field office records, etc. So you guys can download it. All you gotta do is just go on the archives.gov, African American Heritage, and look up African Americans Records Freedmen Bureau. That's all you gotta do. Look up the Freedmen Bureau. But obviously that didn't last very long, because if it lasts very long, then there wouldn't be a second phase of the Civil Rights Act. So let's talk about the first civil right. Now, the civil rights that we know of is the civil rights of Dr. King's era, which was in 1964, right? But there was another form of Civil Rights Act. Let's look at the first civil rights. Okay, right here, the first Civil Rights Act of 1866. Check this out. It says the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was the first United States federal law to define citizenship and affirm that all citizens are equally protected by the law. It was mainly intended in the wake of the American Civil War to protect the civil rights of persons of African descent born in or brought to the United States. To protect the civil rights of a person of African descent born in or brought to the United States. The act was passed by Congress in 1865 and vetoed by United States President Andrew Johnson in April 1866. Congress again passed the bill to support the 13th Amendment, and Johnson again vetoed it. But a two-thirds majority in each chamber overrode the veto to allow it to become law without presidential signature. So, introduction and amendment. The author of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was United States layman Trumbull, and Congressman James F. Wilson summarized what he considered to be the purpose of the acts as follows when he introduced the legislation in the House of Representatives. It provides for equality of citizens of the United States in the enjoyment of civil rights and immunities. What do these terms mean? Do they mean that in all things civil, social, political, all citizens without distinction of race or color shall be equal? By no means can they be construed. Do they mean that all citizens shall vote in the several states? No, for suffrage is a political right which has been left under the control of the several states, subject to the action of Congress only when it becomes necessary to enforce the guarantee of a republican form of government protection against a monarchy. Nor do they mean that all citizens shall sit on the juries or that their children shall attend the same school. The definition given to the term civil rights in Boyer Law's dictionary is very concise. It is supported by the best authority. It is this civil rights are those which have no relation to the establishment, support, or management of government. So it's kind of like the separate but equal type of thing, basically. So it says during the subsequent legislative process, the following key provision was deleted. There shall be no discrimination in civil rights or immunity among the inhabitants of any state or territory of the United States on the account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. John Bunham was an influential supporter of this deletion on the ground that courts might construe the term civil rights more broadly than people like Wilson intended. Weeks later, Senator Trumbull described the bill's intended scope. This bill in no manner interferes with the municipal regulation of any state, which protects all alike in their rights of person and property. It could have no operation in Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, or most of the states of the Union. On April the 5th, 1866, the Senate overrode President Andrew Johnson veto. This marked the first time that the U.S. Congress ever overrode a presidential veto for a major piece of legislation. So that civil rights bill was basically more so like separate but equal type of thing. So let them have their own community, let them have their own society, but treat them fairly. Give them the same amount of resources that the white counterparts are getting. So that's what it sounds like to me. And that was the first Civil Rights Act. That was the first Civil Rights Act of 1866. But you'll never hear nothing about that either. All right, so I want to show you guys another source for the Freedmen Bureau. Hello, Jolanda. How you doing? How you doing, Jolanda? All right, so if you guys want to check this book out, check out this PDF. It's called the Freedmen's Bureau and Reconstruction. All right, so it goes into more depth about the Reconstruction era and the Freedmen's Bureau during that time period, during the Reconstruction era. So the title, yeah, that's the title, and the authors are Paul Kimbala and Randall M. Miller. And it was published in 1999. So either you can check this out on Amazon, you can go to your local library, you can download the PDF, or you can go to Barnes and Nobles and see if they have this book. Okay, that's what's up. That's what's up, Jolanda. Chilling, learning. That's what's up. I'm glad that you was able to come through. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so that's all I have for these two topics. So I hope that you guys was inspired and you guys learned something. Again, I always just make sure I present the sources so that way you guys can look up these things for yourselves and you can be able to research information instead of just having someone tell you something and they're not able to back up what they're talking about or not able to show proof and they just want to convince you that what they're saying is true. But yeah, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Thank you for those new subscribers that's coming through. Thank you for sharing my content. Thank you for checking out the videos. And make sure you hit the notification bell. So until next time, until I do my next video, you guys please take it easy. Please be safe. And peace and power elevation be to all of you. Thank you so much. All right. This is your girl Tiffany and I'm logging off.